Hey, welcome to the Building Doctor Show. I'm your host, Jens Johansson. Glad to see you here to learn more about your buildings. It's Halloween season. What's scarier than a ghost? Opening up your attic hatch and finding thousands of dollars of water damage, structural damaged wood and framing, moldy drywall, attic partition walls, or a family of raccoons living rent free. So today we're going to be exploring the real horrors inside and above your ceiling, and more importantly, how you can prevent them. So if you join us on the podcast or YouTube today, thanks for watching that. Thanks for listening. You can enter your comments there and we'll get them eventually. But if you'd like to have your questions answered live, be sure to visit our website and sign up for the Building Doctor Show and attend live via Zoom. So stick around. We'll have that live Q&A at the end. We'll answer as many questions for you as we can in our time today. Our producer Carolyn will be monitoring the chat, and I will go through the Q&A panel at the end of the show. So the Q&A section is where you leave your questions. The chat section is where Carolyn will be handing things out or maybe adding some guides and things like that. So we'll also be doing a raffle giveaway at the end. So stick around for that. That's the benefit, another benefit of watching it live. And as always, remember, this show is for educational content only. We're not giving legal, financial, or engineering advice here on the internet. But don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons and ask those questions. Those all help our ratings. It helps everybody understand what you're going through. Maybe they're going through something pretty similar and they didn't think about that. So it also fuels our desire to create more of this content. So let's get into attics and roofs, because they work together. So let's jump into that. And we got to figure out how to turn off that intro music. So, all right. So today's agenda: the 6 ways attics get into trouble, kind of a myth versus reality, re-roofing, what you need to pay attention to when you're re-roofing, cleanup and remediation protocols. If you find some stuff, here's how to fix it. And then some HOA best practices. And yeah, we're gonna go through this to help you figure this stuff out. So here's some juicy, no pun intended. We've got some juice over here, some wet, sweating, condensing attics. So here's what we're looking at. In this photo, we can see the bottom of the roof sheathing going up. That's plywood in this photo. It could be plywood or OSB. You can see it doesn't look orange like it originally came off the off the stack at the store. And then these are drywall attic partition walls. They can be called partition walls, party walls, fire walls, a variety of things. But basically, it's if you have a row of units, you'll have these walls going all the way up to the roof between each unit. And the reason they do that is if one unit's attic has a fire, it doesn't spread as quickly over all the units. And so we actually want these partition walls. But what these partition walls do inevitably is they break up the space and the ventilation flow in your large roof over multiple attics. And so they're something we have to think about. But essentially they're drywall, and drywall and water don't get along, as you can see, the black and white and kind of yucky looking mold there. And then here's our trusses. This is our framing members that hold up our roof. And so we can get some, water damage on those starting and kind of growing in there. So this is a really condensing roof, and that means it's not the moisture in the attic is not getting out. And in these sloped roofs, we have the insulation across the bottom, or basically your ceiling. We have the insulation there, and then the attic is open, but it's kind of this dead space. And we know that that roof heats up. So if this attic space doesn't have airflow, it kind of turns into this sweaty box and it condenses, and that water causes problems. So then we get into what happens when the roof sheathing gets a little too rotten or a little too much condensation. Here we can see the OSB that's under the shingle roofs. Here's some kind of vent, whether it's an attic vent or a bath fan, maybe. Here's the trusses going across. Here's a broken truss. I don't know if it was from too much water or what, but you can see the roof sheathing itself has turned to crumbly, chunky uh, pieces. So while your roof membrane may have life left in it, if the sheathing underneath it is water damaged and needs to be replaced, we have to pull the roof off to replace that sheathing and do it right. So this is also kind of a good thing to talk about. We're going to talk about roof leaks or bulk water. We call it bulk water. That's just a lot of water coming through a hole in the roof. And so that's coming down. It's going to hit this roofing membrane and come through some kind of hole or mislap around this vent or some kind of mislap in the underlayment and come straight through. The attic condensation and moisture is going to be kind of built up in this attic space. So we get into problems with the roof manufacturers saying, we offer a 25-year roof, we offer a 50-year roof. That warranty says my roof shingle or my roof membrane will last that long. But if your substrate is deteriorating for whatever reason, that's not our warranty. And so this is something to bear in mind. So in this photo, we've got a typical flat roof. This looks like a commercial building. But you can see we've pulled off some of the roof membrane and our plywood is just soaking wet and has a lot of problems there. So in a flat roof, water can come through a hole and run under the roofing membrane. Think of it like a water bed, and you can just the water can seep everywhere depending on the type of roof membrane. And so we can prevent that with different types. So there's little ins and outs we'll talk about here. But this is failed roof sheathing. All right, so the 6 ways. We got roof leaks, that's the bulk water monster. We got attic ventilation issues, getting that science right. We'll obviously talk more about that. Extra ventilation, getting into the attic. So the attic is only designed to ventilate itself. So if I have a duct from a bath fan that's not connected or just duct it into the attic, there's attic vents, it'll just breathe out, and dumping more ventilation into it. Resident generated issues. Now, these aren't as popular, but they're real. So we have, humans can do things to raise more condensation or water vapor into the attics. Remodeling disturbances, we'll talk about that. And then design concerns, either when Mother Nature fights back or when the science isn't quite right. So, when we think about bulk water, we think about drywall ceiling damage. Your drywall's dripping and blistering and bubbling, and you've got a bucket in your bedroom, or you've got towels on your windowsill, and there's just water pouring through. The attic ventilation, we have a lower E vent and an upper ridge vent, typically in a sloped roof. Talked about that. Extra ventilation, furnace ductwork, bath fans disconnected, things aren't sealed right. There's water vapor is getting there where it shouldn't be there. One of the biggest resident generated issues is not using that bath fan when we're taking a long shower. So think teenagers. Hey, when I come into the bathroom after your shower, why is the mirror all steamed up and the cabinets are wet? That water is moving upwards through the house and through the ceiling into the attic. And that remodeling, where we put a bunch of can lights in, especially in the top floor units. The guys would be in there, they'd cut a hole in the drywall, they'd kind of scoot the insulation away, they'd put their can light and never come back and pack the insulation back around it. So now we had an easy path for water vapor and heat to get up into that attic. And then design concerns are, shady environments built into the trees, never get sun to dry out. Maybe there's not a lot of air movement because of adjoining buildings and the wind can't push through the event and out. And roofs with many angles. There's an interesting dilemma. when we started in kindergarten drawing a picture of our house, our roof always looked like this. It had a little chimney and it had a little door on the house. And so that's how everybody thought a nice big sloped roof should look. Now we get roof lines that have some wings to them, and we've got water coming down into a valley, or we want to make a modern home and our roof line looks like this. And then we're trying to figure out how to ventilate it, trying to slope it, trying to do whatever with it. So design can also play a part of that because, design's fun. We want a cool looking building. But now that we've changed the design, how does that make it work well? So those are the things we're talking about. Okay. Roofing material failure. We'll talk about how roofs leak. Roofing material failure is the typical thing. Kind of a typical lifespan. Composition shingles, those asphalt shingles, 20 to 25 years. You get into a tile, those kind of have a 40 to 50 year. Cement tile, clay tile. You have flat roof membranes, TPO, PVC, tar, torch down roofing. Those have a 15 to 25 year, depending on type. So we're in your roof inspections, we're looking for some key indicators. We're looking for how those shingles, how the granules stay on the asphalt. So we call that granular loss. When you look at a shingle, you'd see consistent granules or kind of faded granules. You look in the gutters and you'd see a big pile of granular loss ending up in the gutter, clogging your downspouts, things like that. We're looking for curling and warping or buckling or cracking of shingles because the roof's too hot, so we don't have good ventilation. We're looking for ponding water on flat roofs, or low sloped roofs, we call them. So why do we have a pond? This isn't a pond. This isn't a lake. This is a roof. So why do we have this built up water here? Roof vents mislapped with the underlayment, meaning, just like a window needs its WRB on top of the flange so it sheds water correctly. A roof vent, if it's on top of the underlayment, it's a mislap. And so we want to make sure that underlayment's on top of that, then the shingle's on top of that. So everything is shingled properly, meaning the upper overlaps the lower. So those types of things, roofs without proper flashings. We'll talk a little bit about brick flashings, things like that. And then just the importance of, kind of a visual inspection, an annual inspection, maybe every 3 years inspection. Maybe there's an inspection that happens with your reserve study, kind of proactive replacement schedules. And so this is this HOA action plan for a roof inspection, at least visual. And a lot of times on shingle roofs, we can kind of peel up the edges and see what's going on underneath them without pulling off roof shingles themselves. Pretty easy to pull shingles off. You just have to lace them back in. But when we get older, especially 15 plus year old roofs, we want to really be out there, really poking them, excuse me. And for flat roofs, we're going to be checking the seams or take our little poker and make sure the seams are tight, still welded together well. Another thing with flat roofs is you'll see the mesh or the membrane. So we've all seen that white TPO PVC roof on a commercial building, maybe looking out the window above them. And how that product is made is a fiberglass mesh, and then the roofing membrane is laid into it. That mesh allows us to roll it up in rolls and lay it out, and it gives it some stability. But actually, the surface layer wears off due to UV fade or UV degradation. And then we get down to that mesh. So you actually look down, you see this fiberglass mesh on the roof, and that's a sign that your membrane has worn thin and it's time for replacement. So your action plan there, set up that roof inspection every 2 to 3 years, and especially for a little bit older roofs. And be a little bit. We can maintain a roof longer than 20 to 25 years as long as everything's installed right. So we can get some more life out of your roofs. Vents and flashing, the usual suspects. Premature failure. When good roofs go bad, we'll talk about those. So vents and flashing is kind of the second way. And these are pipe boots. So your plumbing pipe comes out, has a little boot around it with a gasket. Sometimes those gaskets will tear or rip or peel away. The chimney flashing, we'll show you some pictures around brick chimneys where we have to correct counter flashing so we don't just caulk it in place and hope the caulk doesn't crack. Curb, HVA curb penetration. So if you have that roof equipment, remember that flat roof I showed you had a bunch of equipment up there. So those curbs are done well. Skylights are another thing that has a curb. And so good flashing and counter flashing around that. So just make sure that you are inspecting those along with your roof inspection. I think I've got a photo here to show you. We are inside an attic. So I'm standing in the insulation. We can see the roof line goes down this way and then levels out over here. This is the back of the metal roof to wall flashing. And you can see it comes down to here and stops. It doesn't meet up with another piece of flashing here. So any water that is on that flashing is running down the wall and then gets to just dump directly into the attic. And now you can see this water staining. And why is my ceiling leaking here? This is weird. And so this is a pretty clear picture of your roof to wall flashings didn't come down together correctly. And instead, we're dumping into the attic. The chimney, like I talked about before, brick is an interesting thing. So these step flashing pieces come up. So they actually come up, and now I have a skyward facing flashing where if I'm water dripping down the brick, I would get right in behind here and come down through. Some cheap people will put some sealant, caulking, black stuff, smear it on, make it look messy. The right way to do it is do a counter flashing. And this is actually where we take a grinder and cut the mortar, put the piece in right here. You can see this piece covers that piece. This piece covers the next piece. These two pieces cover those pieces and so on. So it's kind of a step flashing. And then we can caulk that in. So if I'm the water running down, I hit that, I jump out, and now I'm back onto the roof and I keep going. So up here, we can have some head flashing or maybe an apron or a saddle flashing there at the top of the brick. So if I'm water cruising down the chimney, I don't get trapped behind the chimney. I make like a little thing, like a snow plow, if you will. So the water comes down, drains around the chimney instead of getting stuck on the back of the chimney. So, talked about skylights and things like that. So priority inspection areas, take a look at these things. I'm not so much worried about these shingles down here other than granular loss or chipping and cracking and any kind of wind damage I might see. And that's another thing. If I get a brittle shingle that curls, now the wind grabs it and rips it off, and it wouldn't be curling if there wasn't a problem, right? So these are things to look for in your roof inspection. Okay, the premature failure, when good roofs go bad. So this is installation errors, improper nailing, inadequate underlayment, poor ventilation. So it's heartbreaking when our clients come to us. I just had the roof replaced 5 years ago, and now I've got all these problems. Now I have to tear off this 5-year-old roof to get to that bad sheathing and get to that issue and replace it. Or what's even more heartbreaking is when they put a new hat on an old problem. And so they don't address those underlying issues and just put another roof on. And then that one goes bad. And then they just put another roof on. And then that one goes bad because they haven't fixed what's going on underneath it. The manufacturer versus workmanship warranties, kind of two different things. The manufacturer, again, is guaranteeing my product won't leak for 25 years, so it won't develop a hole in it. But the installer is giving a warranty for a certain period of time. And then, you have other programs where we have like a 5-star premium warranty where the manufacturer steps in and covers installation issues as well. So there's different levels of warranty you can buy specifically for leaks and things like that. But bottom line, always have a licensed contractor with proper insurance, do the work. They've been trained. They've typically been trained by the manufacturer to be able to offer that extended warranty. So they're doing it like the manufacturer wants them to do. And then your deal is keep those detailed records of the roofing work, the warranties, and the contractors for future reference, handle claims. And that's one of the challenges of having a bunch of buildings, 23 building project. We kind of do the roofs when we want to do them or when they need to be done. And we've got different roofers throughout the whole place, and people can't remember who did what, when they did it, what products they used. And so that's the closeout documents that we have of this building has this roof on it with this kind of warranty, and this is the contractor that did it. So if there's ever a problem in the warranty period, call that contractor for that building, and so on. And so keeping track of that paperwork. So your action item is keep those detailed records and make sure you have the warranties in place and know who did what. So, all right, now we're going to get into attic ventilation. And so here's a graphic of a functioning attic and a dysfunctioning attic. Dysfunctional. Okay, so the basic premise of the sloped roof is that we have air intake that comes in the low side and it gets to exit at the high side, basically through the stack effect from physics that says warm air rises. And so as this heats up in the attic, the warm air is at the top. We have attic ventilation up high, whether it's a ridge vent or button vents, turtle vents. You can call them different things, but that's this example. Here's either a continuous ridge vent or another type of vent. So we get natural airflow that comes through here. In the functioning attic, we have any kind of fan or ductwork or plumbing flue thing has a duct that extends all the way out to the roof. And it doesn't stop here and just dump moist air into the attic. We've got can lights and things like that that are sealed and covered in insulation. And so we have a good adequate insulation. So this R50, these levels vary based on where you're at, but a good thick layer of insulation that holds the heat and water vapor down here and doesn't let it get up onto this cold roof surface in the snow time and condense. Or in the hot summer, where I'm running AC down here, cold air hits the hot roof, condense as well. So we want to let it flow out. So a couple of key things. We have what's called insulation baffles. These are cardboard baffles that we staple between the joists, which prevent the blown in insulation from getting blown into and covering those event holes or bird blockings and the circles you can see when you look up at your soffits. You'll see some circles or you'll see a strip vent. So we have good baffles to keep the insulation out. That allows good airflow. And then we have good ridge airflow. So it's usually a 50-50 split. That's what the code says. It allows us to take 50% on the low side, exhaust 50% on the high side. So on the dysfunctional attic, we've got no ventilation coming in. We have no insulation or minimal insulation. We have no exiting exhaust. And then we start, getting rain on the inside or condensation. Remember those slimy pictures we saw? That further compresses your insulation and wets it down. And then pretty soon it starts coming through your drywall. And then in the wintertime, if the conditions are right, you'll get what's called ice damming. And so ice actually forms out here because we have so much condensation and heat causing the snow to melt, but then actually build up and build up and build up. Pretty soon we'll get this big ice dam, big long icicles, and then we have it causes just more problems. So icicles may be pretty, but they're an indication that your roof isn't working right. And so you need to look into that. But here's kind of the concept. And then, oh, one more thing. Here's our vents. So we have a 2-inch vent. And we've got 2 inches of snow. We'll probably be okay. If you have a 2-inch vent and normally 12 inches of snow, now all of a sudden your vents are covered, right? So they're blocked by the snow. So getting the proper vent, making sure it's above the snow line, that's something to think about too. And that was winter conditions. These are summer conditions. So uh, when we don't have good attic flow, the attics get really hot. And here's the easy way you can do that. Everybody, if you live in a pitched roof, you know you have a attic access. It's in a upstairs hallway or maybe the master closet or something like that. If you put your head up there, you kind of move that thing aside and put your head up there, you'll either feel the air moving or you'll just feel no air movement and it's just blistering hot. And so that's a quick indication that it's too hot. You don't have good attic flow. Then you get cupping and warping shingles that blow off come wintertime winds. And your air conditioning is working overtime because your attic is so hot that it's kind of heating up the rest of your unit. So you can kind of stick your head up in there. Have a little flashlight, look at your roof sheeting. If it looks black, call us. If it's pretty plain looking and you feel some airflow, pretty good. Just watch over those eyes that you see over in the corner of the set family activities. So, all right. So more juicy photos. So here's another attic we're looking up in. We've got a variety of colors on the roof sheeting. It's obviously black and even the framing. Now this attic looks like it's perhaps been coated in the past. So they do sell some mold treatment paint for these, just paint it and that'll encapsulate the mold. Well, the mold's there for a reason, meaning you've got blocked ventilation. So just painting over your mold, the mold will just come back. And so this rafter was painted over and it's black again. And so don't get talked into, I'll just paint the stuff on your attic and it's a miracle stuff. And you have to fix the problem. Otherwise you're putting putting a new hat on an old problem. So let's not do that. But if you look up and see this, let us know. So we can help you with that. Next slide. This one actually kind of had a doorway going into the attic, but you can see this was a finished, had some drywall. It's called fire taping. It wasn't perfectly taped, but it had the first coat of mud on it. And it was A106, but it looked like a petri dish in here. So all the nice, perfectly circular colonies of, that mold spore, even getting onto the door trim. Now these are gaps between your door trim and your drywall. So this air is getting into your unit. There's no rubber gasket on this door sealing everything. And so I would be concerned about air quality getting into this particular unit or coming through that attic access. What are you breathing? This is an example of what sheathing, OSB sheathing look like. Nice, clean, orange. But we have some drippage happening on our trusses here. And so why is it accumulating here? This could be a water leak coming through the seam of the OSB and just getting down onto the trusses because we know the OSB is seamed on those trusses and nailed. Here you can see your little attic eave bird blocking holes. You can see these dark attic, but I can see the daylight through them. That's a good sign. So again, when you're kind of poking your head up in there, Look out at the eaves. Can I see daylight? If I don't see daylight, that means there's no ventilation. And when I'm shining my flashlight around, does it primarily look orange, or do I have some kind of ugly water stains on it? That's an indication of something going on. Here's another indication. So this is a lower type wall, probably a roof flashing leak again. One of the important parts to notice is we've got a mix of pink and brown insulation. This is that blown in cellulose insulation, meaning paper, maybe some fiberglass content in it. But some of it's black. And so sometimes it came in a dark color. A lot of the times it's white, pink, or yellow. And so why do we have dark colors around a dark water leak? The cellulose is turning dark and the insulation is getting moldy. And that's a good indicator that this isn't right. It looks like the top half inch is this dark color. The insulation itself will act as a filter. So if there's a lot of air moving around, the insulation will kind of grab onto that air, and just like your furnace filter, it'll look dirty. Here's some more attics. So this is a series of trusses. I can see the roof sheathing. Roof sheathing is white and black and a whole bunch of different colors. And here's my holes for my bird blocking, but I can't see any daylight out of them. And so I've got the holes, but something's blocking it. Maybe there's some enclosed soffits on the outside. Who knows? But there's obviously no airflow in here. This photo, really dark, wet, slimy roof sheathing. I've got a gable end wall. This is OSB sheathing, but look at this white, just organic growth there. It's pretty. It's fascinating. Looks like white cotton candy, but not very good. But just lots of water. It's wet, moldy, nasty, and poses some problems. This is a really black roof sheathing with like yellow drippage of sap or something coming through it. You can see it dripping down the trusses. Here's the exterior wall, this gable end wall. This looks like a kind of some type of vent, something hanging down through it, but I can't quite tell. But here's some more of that white mold, black mold, all sorts of colors in here. So this is a bad one. This sheathing probably has to be replaced. I doubt we're scraping it and painting it or encapsulating it. All right, here's some ice dams, some icicles coming down, kind of causing more leaks. The problem with the ice dam is it backs the water up, and then the water can actually work its way up under the shingle and kind of go backwards. So then it gets around, and you see here, here's the gutter with icicles coming out of it. Here's the space between the gutter and the fascia, and there's icicles coming out of that. So we have water flowing where it's not supposed to be flowing. And this has to do with you know, poor ventilation and extra, you know, airflow, etc. So these peaked roofs are called cold roofs because the roof itself is usually cold. The insulation blankets at the bottom on top of the units, so that keeps the heat in there. The attic space is typically exterior, outside temperature. So we need the intake at the soffit, the exhaust at the peak, so we get this airflow moving through. And that prevents ice damming, reduces coolant loads, extends shingle life, does all these things. So that's a cold roof. Now let's talk about what a warm roof is. And you can Google warm roof design and you'll see what I'm talking about. But in a warm roof, if we had a pitched roof, like a vaulted ceiling, for instance, the insulation is either up against the roof or on top of the roof. And so that whole space now becomes conditioned. And it's usually seen in flat roofs or low slope roofs where you just put the insulation on top. And so the joists now are part of the conditioned space. And we can do that with spray foam. We can do it with insulation on top of the sheathing deck. Here's a couple of examples, often done in commercial, but in this example, you can see the roof rafter. We've got some sheathing, and we've got this layers of solid foam, then the roof membrane. And so this whole attic is now part of the conditioned space. And it makes more sense over here in the vaulted ceiling where you have the angled ceiling. And you can see the whole joist bay is filled, and maybe there's even some insulation on the top of that roof. But I'm making a warm roof essentially. And here's a good description of how it goes on there as well. If you're looking for roof rafters, then the roof deck, then insulation, then roof membrane. So these will change the aesthetics. You can see I'll have a thicker fascia. I'll have a taller, it looks like a thicker roof than a thinner roof. But everything on top is designed to be water resistant, stop the heat flow. And there's little ins and outs. I put my foam sheets. I offset the gap so I don't get any channels for cold air to go all the way through and cause problems. So all that is part of roofing design that we can help you with. So one of the problems we see, I talked about spray foam. Let's assume this is spray foam. Spray foam was originally, it's an expanding foam. And so we used to squirt it around windows and it would kind of expand and fill the gap. And somebody said, why don't we spray it into the whole joist bay and it'll fill the gap, and we'll shave off any bottom and then just put drywall on there. And that's an effective insulation. What we started doing in the field was something called flash and bat. So we would spray just 2 inches and then put fiberglass bat up against that. But as you can imagine, it looks great on paper, but what really happens is the fiberglass bat settles and maybe conforms. So now we have this space. And so we don't get to add these two together. If I had 2 inches of this at this R value and 6 inches of this at this R value, I could add them together as long as they were tight. When they're not tight, now I have one layer, dead space, another layer. So I can't add them together, and I have that dead space again that's not ventilated right. Now we just have a big sweaty mess, and it condenses and makes a big mess. So the industry's still figuring out spray foam. Spray foam done well is very good, but kind of this hybrid flash and bat, we're starting to see lots of problems, and we'll see those in the 8-pack townhomes where they tear down one house or 2 houses and build 8 townhomes with a flat roof and rooftop decks, and we're seeing all sorts of problems in the roof system. And then kind of special situations where we have gable end framing and ventilation kind of coordination. We've got these party walls where we're trying to maintain ventilation paths. And then we have kind of consistency across units for multifamily buildings. So these get into roof designs. So in a typical A-frame with ends, as opposed to a hip roof that has those ends tilted and roofed. So it's kind of a 4-sided roof. The end units now have a little different, it's kind of a triangle instead of the middle units that have this piece of roof. And so those end units, we get into trouble with getting them ventilated properly. So that's the consistency across the unit types. Then the party walls, like I talked about, block the airspace. And so you got to kind of bring those into the plan. So as you can see, when I'm trying to calculate ventilation, I really have to be able to get up in the attic and see a few of these types and understand how these buildings are put together. So that's really important to, if we're putting a new roof on, we want to make sure we're inspecting and understanding how the roof is constructed with its party walls and things. So extra ventilation that shouldn't be there. I would say 30 to 40% of the attics we inspect have bathroom fans that dump directly into the attics. And so the idea, the fan installer says, hey, the attic's ventilated. Who cares? Let's just just don't even put a duct on it. Let the fan blow into the attic. The attic has these vent holes and then it'll just get out. Don't worry about it. But if that hot shower can steam up the mirror and steam up the walls, and the walls will get wet, especially a long, hot shower, or even 2 showers a day in the morning and after sports practice when they get home, these types of things. It really is dumping a high level of water vapor into that space that wasn't planned to be there. And so this is a bad idea to just duct things into your attic. So the next thing, we have ductwork, and it was attached to the bottom of the roof vent, but nobody secured it, whether it's duct tape or screws or hose clamps. And over time, it fell loose and is just laying in the insulation, blowing things into it. So I want you to think about any kind of fan is going to take the temperature of the room below that the fan's drawing it out, and it's going to take the water vapor. And so the water vapor, how does anybody with glasses clean the glasses? You blow on it and wipe them off. And that water vapor allows you to kind of clean your glasses, right? So you know what I'm talking about with the showers steaming up. So here's some calculations there. A 10-minute shower can add half a gallon of water vapor into the attic. And so people taking a 20-minute shower, and you got a gallon of water vapor up there. So that's why it's important to get it up and get it out. So inspecting to make sure exhaust fans are hooked up properly. That's a real big takeaway. Okay, here's an example of a metal ducted exhaust fan, kind of weirdly attached. So this is sheet metal tab. So the sheet metal guy cut a circle and he kind of stuck it out the hole. He didn't use a prefab gasket. We got some kind of duct tape on here. Here's the edge of the duct tape, but we have these joints exposed, and we have uninsulated. And so this ductwork is insulated, wrapped with fiberglass insulation. Why? So if there's a lot of hot air in this ductwork, the metal will condense. And you can see the drippage lines on the metal actually from condensing air or condensation on the metal. That'll drip down to the drywall, and people complain about my bath fan is leaking. Well, there's no water in your bath fan. It's either coming from the roof vent, which looks like it's leaking, or dripping down the pipe because of a condensing vent, because it's hot air, like furnace, water heater. Maybe it's a water heater flue. So that's really hot air in there. And then this kind of pattern, it's below the vent penetration. So it could be a leak, either lapped wrong, your raincoat's tucked into your rain pants. That would be a mislap. You want your coat over your pants. Or kind of this is a goofy flange, like I said before. Maybe this is just hot air that's exhausting onto the cold sheathing. But you can clearly see we have black OSB around this vent. We also have it around the edges or the seams. We also have some stuff over here too. So we've got some issues in this attic here with this ductwork. So insulation, sealed pipe, and then, let's see, let's go back to that. And any kind of exhaust gas. So furnace, water heater, this would be, carbon monoxide, things like that. So here, yeah, Yeah, that's this issue. So water heaters and flue pipes disconnected. So not only do we have a lot of heat, we've also got carbon monoxide. We've got water vapor from your furnace or the gas combustion, and you'll get all sorts of code violations and liability concerns. But as a part of your inspection or attic inspections, you know, you don't have to do every attic every 2 years, but we're going to sample these attics in this building in this 2 year cycle, then the opposing attics or the ones that didn't get inspected in the next 2 year cycle. So we're getting into enough attics in building B to be able to see what's going on up here. And then, of course, you're paying attention to maintenance concerns if somebody complains about water leaking through their vent fan. So, but carbon monoxide is a big deal from the gas combustion. Keep people safe. So these HVAC inspections should verify proper ventilation. And then, we've got fire flue vents that we have a roof overflow drain dumping into the fire exhaust vent. So this really isn't an attic thing, but we've got HVAC stuff. And so these roof overflows only activate when your roof drains are clogged. So they go to the exterior. So when it's raining and you see, why is there water coming out of that thing? Oh, that tells me my roof drain is plugged, and I better go up and fix that. But if we're going to have roof water draining into our flue pipe, it'll probably mess up your furnace and things like that. So we want to make sure we're looking at all these things. And then leaking supply ductwork. So we kind of talked about that. We saw the tape barely wrapped around things. This is more when you have a furnace. Whoever, I can imagine who thought of this idea. But the furnaces were usually in the garage. So when we don't have a garage, we put the furnaces in a closet. When we don't have an extra closet, look at all the space we have up in the attic. Let's put the furnace up in the attic. So I've got a unheated attic space with a hot box in it called a furnace that goes out with hot lines, or flip it around for your cycle. Could be cold, an air conditioning unit, cold box with cold lines, hot exterior. I'm talking in the winter, it's cold out. Now I have this hot big heater up in my attic. My attic wasn't designed for that. The attic is designed to ventilate itself. And so now I've put this big hot box up there, haven't taped the heat ducts, haven't insulated them, got all this radiant heat, got heat escaping up there. Just makes a gigantic mess. And so we're not to mention we're wasting 20 to 30% of our heating and cooling. So we have duct leaks. So this duct sealing is another reason. Get up in your attics, understand what's happening. And here you can see it. Here is a hot, this is probably a dryer vent. It's this flexi pipe, and somebody got the bright idea to bring it up to a plastic roof boot, which is common. They've taped it off well, but there's so much heat coming up this from the hot dryer and water vapor. We're wringing the wet clothes, we're making them dry. So there's lots of water vapor being shot up. So this cold plastic vent on the cold exterior of the roof is condensing away. And it looks like the roof slope is sloping that way. So down here. Now I can see the underlayment of the roof, and I can tell you my vent or my flange is on top of my underlayment. So if I get any rainwater running down the underlayment, that's why it's there. The rainwater drips in. Then I get a hot vent, and when it's hot and cold come together, it condenses. So here's the water, and it drips down. Then it runs down this sheathing. It turns this stuff moldy, and it drains down to my insulation and causes leaks that come through the ceiling. All right. So resident generated things is another issue, and this is that teenage shower marathon without a fan use. primary mold thing. Cooking, and whether it's, think of these common appliances. We now have instant pots, we have rice cookers, we have, all these things that are steam based, compression based, pressure based, and not to mention, you know, grandma cooking her pasta and it's just bubbling and the pasta sauce takes all day. Noodles take a while. Kitchen's steamed up. So we're not using that range fan and we're not sucking that air moisture out. And so just like you can smell those cooking smells in your unit from somebody down the hall, hopefully it's a good smell, but it's extra vapor. And so we get this buildup of cooking vapor, shower vapor, things like that. So again, just from breathing, families generate 2 to 4 gallons of water vapor a day just through just not sweating, not working out. And so now we add in an indoor sauna. Now we add in a hot tub. Now we add in a big sunken bathtub. And so you can start seeing we can have these things happening. Okay. Then now we get into non-functioning ventilation. So we've got failed fan motors. We've got clogged filters. We've got dryer vents that have too much lint in them. The residents don't report because they don't notice. The CCNR responsibilities, what's common area versus what's unit. And so, well, the association sends around people to clean the dryer ducts, so why don't they clean my fan ducts? Okay, well, there's a distinction there. And so most bylaws that I've read say the resident is responsible for the appliances, and your bath fan is an appliance. Your furnace or water heater is an appliance. And so residents just don't know, or they don't want to report it because they don't want to pay for it. And so it's a little bit of, HOA consideration there. We might want to inspect some bath fans for adequate operation. Here's a tip. We've got some of these old, I turn on the fan, it makes noise, it must be working. So take a square of toilet paper, hold it up to the vent, and if it sucks that toilet paper up to the vent, it's working. If it's just making noise and not pulling it up to the vent, it's not working. So these are, and then we have fancy CFM calibrated machines we can put up and tell you exactly how many CFM you're moving. The old code used to say 50 CFM is adequate. That code has moved up to 70 and even 90, depending on where it is in your house. And so we've got an old fan. It's an old, mid 70s place. It's an old fan, probably doesn't work well, etc. Probably time to replace fans, but it still makes noise. Okay. So sometimes we'll, like your hotels, we'll tie the light fixture to the fan. And so when I flick the switch on, the fan's on, right? So we're not depending on a resident or a teenager figuring it out how to do that stuff. There's other ways you can put your fans on a humidistat switch. So if it's humid in there, the switch turns on. And the other way, before fans, we would have to open the window. The term crack the window, open that window a little bit when you're taking a bath or a shower. And that was the idea. Let the steam out. All right. More crumbling. You can see the OSB is just crumbling. And you can see water droplets on it, and not to mention the black goo up in there. All right. So communication strategy. So this is again talking to the residents, and basically it's use your fans 15 minutes after showering. Keep that kitchen fan on 15 minutes after I've turned the pot off, just to continue to suck the air out. Open the windows. There's nothing wrong with opening the windows. That's what they're there for. They can open, let air in, and let that stuff do that. So, but it's talking to your residents about moisture control. Some windows have a little vent on them that you can open and close. Talking to them about inspecting their fans, making sure they're inspecting their fans. if we're up there inspecting the attics, here's a 6-pack of units and one attic has problems. Well, we know the roof is good. We know the vents are good. We know that whatever is good. Let's go into the unit and, here we go. 12 people living in a 2-bedroom unit and 12 showers or 24 showers, depending on how many showers they're taking. So that additional resident load created that problem. So that's the human factor we talk about. All right. Now we've got remodeling disturbances. So when improvements cause problems. And so these can lights, and everybody likes to put in can lights. And so especially on the top floor units or where you reach the attic, putting in a whole bunch of can lights. I've now made a hole through the drywall. There's a couple of different kinds of cans. Insulation contact, that's that insulation contact rated, or non-insulation contact. And so one is designed to have insulation buried in insulation and not cause a fire. The other one's designed to stay away from that. You have to build a drywall box around it. So some of that stuff doesn't happen. So now I have an air leak of heat. I also have a light fixture that's producing heat. And then, so between the leakage of heat and water vapor and the extra heat up there, several of them, lots of can lights, we can get some air and moist air transfer, and then not to mention energy loss. So kind of understanding that architectural approval, that should be something you should talk about if you do have an architectural committee. Tell me if you're remodeling, tell me how many can lights you're putting in, tell me what that's going to do to the insulation. Maybe we inspect the attic after you're done to make sure the insulation was moved back around and we don't have problems with what you've done up there. So insulation disruption, that's basically the work people up there moving it around, stepping on it, compressing it, moving it so they can put in the new framing member or do something and not putting it back. Now I have an uninsulated portion of the ceiling that's causing problems. Attic space conversions. This is another one we got to watch for. And then storage in attics, and we've got some photos of that. But think about these these are remodeling disturbances. We'll get to. Okay, so insulation disruption. We talked about that when the contractor's up there doing some work. What you can require, and I think a logical thing would be to, hey, we want to inspect your work and make sure it was done well and make sure it's put back together correctly, because the attic is common area usually, or limited common area because they can only access it from your unit. But what you do in your unit could damage that. Okay. And now attic space conversions. Here's a good one. So, we've got these really high ceilings and we've got this big space and it's actually fire taped out and drywalled. So why can't I make a little home office in here? I mean, I don't mind that roof drain leader coming down through my desk or the, couple of droopy lines. I mean, this wasn't really intended for occupied space, but I can fit through that hatch and I can move a little desk in there and I can have a little private home office. This is great. This is actually great. It's not disturbing anything. It's not disrupting the airflow. It's not disrupting stuff, but you can see where people look in there. Oh, look at all the space. I can pack it full of junk, like in the right picture. So Christmas supplies, Halloween decorations, boxes full of junk. Now, this is more of a problem to me because I don't have adequate ventilation. I don't see any ventilation at the roof. I'm like, no, the stuff's up here. It's a weight issue. It's compressing the insulation. It's proper storage kind of a platform. One box of wreaths isn't going to hurt anything, but placing attics just packed full of junk. That's what storage units are for. Go get a storage unit. Keep it out of your attic. So when you give people the opportunity, they will of course be interested in it. So it's you gotta check it. Again, what does the HOA do about this? Just monitor, check occasionally. So, and yeah, we talked about some of these weight limit things, typically 10 pounds per square foot or less. So how many boxes? If it's a heavy box, it's more than that. And you get into fire hazards, breast insulation, proper storage, maybe just difficulty accessing it. You might fall through the ceiling when you're getting to it. So not a great idea. All right. So kind of the last area we're talking about here is design concerns. And so specifically with flat roofs or low slope roofs, we'll call them, we need a minimum slope to drainage, and code tells us 1/4 inch per foot. 1/2 inch per foot is better. We're keeping that water moving. We don't want ponding water, and that's defined as water remaining 48 hours after a rain. And so that language comes from manufacturer's instructions saying, we don't mind the surface getting wet, but if the water's still there 48 hours later, it's an issue. It shouldn't be hanging out if you have proper slope. So this accelerates the membrane deterioration. It increases, leak risk, moss growth, etc. When you are re-roofing, correct the slope. We can add some of that insulation. We can add tapered insulation, and so we can really get the water moving again. And so the trick around flat roofs is don't be a dope. Slope. Get your water running. Then if you're going to be re-roofing it, make your drains bigger and make your tapered membrane, more tapered. So a couple different photos. Here's an old torched down or built up roof. This is probably a drain with 3 feet of grass growing onto the top of it, but we've just got standing water. It's just a pond. And so another thing of the standing water over time, water's heavy, right? So we've got a bunch of water up there, and it'll actually push down on the sheathing and make the ponding worse. You go over to the upper photo, and you can see the dirt staining, but why do I have ponding water here? That could be a symptom of soft sheathing. That could be a symptom of this pond goes right through a seam. So if that seam isn't done perfectly, the water is dripping into it and making things softer and worse. But you can kind of see the dirt stains. They're trying to get it to drain. It's not quite draining well. And so in a re-roof, you can look at that and say, hey, let's fix this condition so it's no longer an issue. Here's your heat bump. This is what's called I talked about it before, curbs, built up curbs. So I've got a little 4-inch curb. If I get 6 inches of snow, the snow is now over the curb and it's kind of working its way in. Same with skylights, same type of deal. If I have 4-inch curb of a skylight, but 8 inches of snow, I'm going to have leakage around those openings. So raising your curbs, making them the right size and shape. This would be an example of a PVC. Maybe it's a torch down that's been coated, but roll roofing, what we would call flat roof. Here's your example of your sloped roof and your shingles. So this building has both types. So this is just an old roof and it needs some work. All right. Environmental challenges. So what we mean by that is shady, just dark. It's house is built in the forest. It's always covered in 2 inches of pine needles, and it just the memory doesn't flow. The gutters are always plugged. The drains are always so. Understanding, hey, those trees were planted 15 years ago, and they were pretty when they were 10 feet tall. Now they're 50 feet tall, and they're dropping maple leaves all over our roof. Maybe it's time to start over with new 15-foot tall trees again, or maybe prune these way back, or get some sunshine. Sounds good for us. It's good for your roof too. Helps kind of dry things out, warm it up. Cold climate issues. If it's always cold, again, you have to kind of think about condensation and stuff. So moss and algae growth. All these things lead to accelerated deterioration in your roof. So we can deal with this with insulation and air sealing and all sorts of things there. And then the ventilation design problems. And so talk a little bit about that. You might hear a concept called short circuiting. And so if I'm trying to get low and go high, but I have a gable vent too, air is going to take the path of least resistance. It's going to come through the gable vent and go right out the roof. So it's not going to wash that area of the rest of the roof in flowing air that grabs the moisture and takes it away. Or it's going to come through the lower vent and go out the gable and not come through the roof vent there. So that's a concept called short circuit. Understand how your ventilation is working, and it doesn't have another path to go to. More vents doesn't always equal better. So we want that balance. We want that 50-50 most of the time. So now we get into the science. And so the code gives us this 50-50 rule that we say it works on paper. But some real world things have some complication. So what we're trying to avoid is 80-20 or 20-80. We're trying to get an equal balance, 50-50. If it's 55-45, I'm still fine with it. But we want air more, let's see, we want more air coming in. And so we can't have restriction on the vents. So you actually want a higher on your ridge. So you'd want a 60-40. So we can have proper airflow because the heat is then going to rise and push it out. So we want to understand that a rule of thumb works for most cases, and that's where roofing ventilation, attic ventilation is a little bit art, a little bit science. So that's just having a design professional really look at it and understand: do I have shady trees? Do I have lots of resident moisture? Is this a student housing that has all sorts of showers? So there's all things to take into consideration. Stack effect, we talk about hot air rises. And then when, good roofs have problems. And so this is even new code compliant roofs can have isolated moisture issues. And so it's usually complex geometry. And my roof system looks like this instead of a straight, nice flat piece. But we might have unusual conditions. We might have extreme weather events. So just because I have one attic that has problems doesn't necessarily mean all of them need to be fixed. So that's why we're looking at all of them, or we're looking at a big sampling. I think for the most part, it's good. This one, maybe we can add fans. This one, we can do some extra little work to get that working properly. So ventilation design, the 50-50 rule is best case scenario. So sometimes we've got to dig deeper. So kind of that myth versus reality of my attic has mold, therefore it's the roofer's fault. It's like, well, here's kind of a reality breakdown. 40% of the time, we've got roofing leaks or improper installation. 60% of the time, we have ventilation issues or design or disconnected mechanicals or resident generated moisture. And so more than half of the time, it's what we see in our investigation is we've got some other issues. It's not a bad roof that you put down, but who was responsible for designing that? And so is the roofer just putting on new shingles, or do they have some design requirement in their contract, such as to calculate that, to check that, to look into the attics, to make sure those vents were hooked up properly again? And it's kind of hard to hook up a bath fan from the outside, right? So if I'm taking the roof off, I have to pull up on the old fan. I got to grab that ductwork, hope there's enough slack in there, cut off the old thing, take the new ductwork and put it on there, tape it up or screw it on, reset it, get my new underlayment lapping correctly, maybe lift it up again and tuck things underneath it. It's like making a bed. And so a little hard if that falls off. I can't reach my arm down into your attic. Now I've got to go knock on your door. Now I've got to get in your attic. And the roofers are going fast. And so, but you can write that stuff into the contract. Okay. So misdiagnosis. leads to expensive roof replacements. It doesn't help. Proper investigation before spending reserve funds on things. Attic inspection by somebody, not just the roofer. We're identifying moisture sources, maybe thermal imaging, addressing the root cause, not just symptoms. And I know we're running a little long here, so I want to get going here. So in a re-roofing project, we want to, when that roof comes off, let's fix what's underneath. Make sure the mechanical systems are up to date, the penetration details. Metal versus plastic. You get a plastic boot for $9 and a good metal one for $12. They're worth the money. So that's the vent material quality we're talking about. Ventilation reassessment, correct versus just replacing what was there. Oh, you had 4 vents, so I put 4 vents back, and it's like, but I was underventilated at 4 vents. I needed 8 vents. Well, it's not what was there. I didn't bid that. So it's that type of argument. Roofing product changes, noticing, we're always the market is full of new and improved things, and have they been tested? Are they the best? The old stuff worked. Why aren't we still using it? So, roof to wall flashings, that's pretty common detail because that requires maybe a couple of rows of siding to come off to get new flashings under the siding, lapped correctly with a WRB, now into your roofing membrane. So, the roofer says, I'm not a carpenter. I put on roofs, so I'll put a roof up to your siding, and so it's not flash drain. We're talking about lower and upper layers. The metal vents versus the plastic ones, they last 200% longer, and the plastic ones get brittle, they chip, they break, they crack. Metal ones don't. Pipe boot flashings, little rubber neoprene boots for $15. The lead boots, I know lead is bad, but lead boots last 100 years and they're $45. So, you can kind of go through those selections there. And then the venting, continuous venting is the best. Continuous ridge vent, continuous soffit vent, as opposed to every other joist or every third joist. Truss bay, we've got vents. And so, continuous is best. And roofing product, changes, slope, changing the slope, changing the drainage. And kind of a cleanup. So when prevention fails, proper attic remediation, we're understanding what's structurally damaged, how the insulation's working. Can we scrub it, sand it, blast it? Can we use some mold preventative coatings with some warranties? There's all sorts of things you can do there. And there's actually some good ones. And then, so kind of a best practices here. Let's get these regular roof and attic checks done. Let's document and gather these documents and save them for the maintenance logs, repair history, the warranty information, the contractor, things like that. Reserve study, coordination for full replacements for players and actual versus estimated costs. Resident education, move-in moisture control info, kind of an annual reminder, kind of remodeling guidelines. We can not be annoying, but we can communicate that this is important. And then clear CC&R governing document definitions, unit area versus common area responsibility. So, yeah, who thought we could talk about roofs and attics as much? So if any of this sounds familiar, use the QR code. If you like to type, just type learn.j2consults.com/consultants on call and get on a free 15-minute phone call with me. And we can walk you through that. And let's see, did we get through our Q&A? Did I miss the Q&A slide? Let me check. You can find us on all the streaming places. Unit inspection, here's that thing. Now we get into Q&A and spooky Q&A stuff here too. Okay, we've got a couple questions. When people found out we were talking attics and roofs, we've got a couple questions here. I see we have one question in the Q&A, so now's your time. I think we have 2 or 3 questions here. So get your questions in to the Q&A section. So the question goes like this. During our last re-roof, the contractor said we needed some more roof vents and added several, but we're still having condensation problems in some buildings. Could we actually have too many vents, and how do we fix short circuiting issues? So um, here's the vent calculation math. The 50-50 balance goes like this. Square footage of the home. So I've got a 1,000 square foot unit. I divide it by 300. The code talks about a 1 in 300 rule if I have 50-50 balance. So I divide it by 300, and then I multiply it by 144 to convert from square footage to square inches. And then I figure out the soffit and vents, dividing that by 2. And so I get where the 300 divided by 1,000 square feet is about 300. Now I have to multiply that by 144 to get square inches. And now I know I need 600 square inches of ventilation. That means I need 300 at the ridge, 300 at the top. And that's how that gets figured out. So when I'm off balance, if I'm getting 70-30 or 37, 70, either way, 70-30 either way, that messes with the airflow and the natural stack effect. And so even though they added more vents, do I have the balance right? Then do I have end units that have a funny roof design they're not working right? And so you could have too many vents and be out of balance, 70-30. But how do we fix short circuiting issues? That's the other vent or the side vent or the gable vent. And how do you fix that? You close it off. So you prevent the air from taking a right turn. You want it to go straight up and out. And so then I would look at some other issues, but that's kind of what I would start with there. Okay, our HOA is planning a roof replacement next year. What specific language should we include in our contractor specifications to ensure proper attic ventilation, prevent future mold problems? Have them provide the attic calculation for vents. Make sure they inspect a sampling of attics. Get them up into 5 or 10 attics. Have language in the contract that they attach the vent ductwork securely. Maybe have some inspection of, we're going to inspect 10 attics, then we're going to make sure all the ductwork is attached securely. Ensure slope and drainage. So where we have standing water, make sure it's re-tapered, re-sloped. Always have them follow manufacturer's instructions. You can point to that because that's what the warranty verifies itself on. If you install it per my instructions, I will give you that 50-year warranty. So make sure that's part of their contract, as opposed to I've been a roofer for 20 years and I've never done it that way. And it's like, you've done it wrong for 20 years. So just make sure they follow manufacturer's instructions if you're relying on manufacturer's warranty. And then have somebody spot check what they're doing. So those are the easiest things to put in. And then let's see, we have several units reporting mold in their attics, but our roofs are only 8 years old. How do we determine whether this is a roofing issue covered by our reserves or a unit owner maintenance issue? Yeah, good question. So like we talked, inspect the attics and the roofs. And then we can install little humidity sensors in the attics and check for high moisture readings. Check those fans, check interior usage, and those will, again, that line of 10 pack building, the middle one's having problems. Those are what the humidity sensors are. We've got them in every attic. Every attic's humidity is 50%, but this one is 95%. And so we can say, and we can come back to the resident and say, what are you doing in here? Oh, you have a marijuana grow operation and you've got hydroponic tanks. Okay, we've seen it. And so it's like, that explains it. And so you can kind of figure that stuff out, but you're getting down to, once you've rolled out the basics, that the building should be working how it's working, then you have to kind of start looking at the resident a little bit and say, what are you doing? Dehumidifiers, humidifiers, those are amazing. Dehumidifiers suck the moisture out of the air. Humidifiers put water vapor into the air. And so we've been in countless units where we walk in and it's just foggy in there. We're like, what are you doing? Well, I have asthma, so I humidify the unit so my nasal passages feel better. It's like, wow, I would turn the fan on. You're causing so much mold with this thing. So just things like that. Look at those. All right. And I think we had another question. So here's questions from the show today. Okay. Let's see. Mostly I haven't understood anything we talked about. Yes. We got technical today, but we are looking at mold and things like this. So we have a 20-year-old flat roof and are in the process of replacing it now. We knew there were some soft spots and marked them. We had them patched and the roof collapsed and fell onto somebody's bed. So the question is about responsibility of the patching company. Yeah, so roof repairs versus roof patching. And she says one of our staff knows something about this, and we will get them on it. But patches versus replacement. So it's just a function of how we're looking at the patch or how that patch is being done. Is it weather tight to weather the storm this weekend, or is it really a permanent patch that's really fixing what's happening there? So we can help you get to the bottom of that and understand why it was patched versus why it wasn't. So yeah, hopefully that helps. But patches versus replacement or temporary repairs versus long-term repairs. So yeah, hopefully I answered your question there. But we have some project knowledge on that and we will get in touch with you about that. Stay tuned. All right. And I don't see any more questions. So we will jump to, let's see, did we jump on? There we go. Giveaways. Okay, here's where we give things away. So we've got a J2 VIP notebook. We've got some spooky Kit Kats. We've got some power banks for the when the power goes out. So I'm going to pick number 12. Pick number 12. So how this works, when you sign into the thing, you get a number and Carolyn will see your number and she will reach out to number 12 and get your address and make sure those things are mailed to you. So thank you for playing that. And then, of course, did you know we have free resources for boards and managers? So if you like to type learn.j2consultants.com/resources, or use your little QR code on the phone and scan that QR code, and that'll take you there. And this is kind of a one pager of everything we offer. So you can sign up for that stuff. You can find our guides. So again, scan there, and that'll take you to that. Basically, go to our website and you'll be directed in the right places. And invite your friends back for Tuesday, November 25th. We will be back. And so type something in the chat if you have an idea for a future show and get that in there. Carolyn will see that and we'll bring that up to the show producers. So thank you very much. Happy Halloween. Stay dry out there. And when you feel like being scared a little bit, poke your head up in your attic and see if it looks good. Hopefully it does. So have a good one. Thank you.